And we attach so much emotion and self-worth to all these things when it's like, these are like primal responses. And if we actually take care of our body, like our bodies, aren't as primed to have those responses.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and my guest today is Neely. You guys probably know her as Indigo Neely from YouTube. She is a mother of 5 who has a successful YouTube channel, a small farm, is a whiz in the kitchen, and if you haven't tried some of her egg white bread recipes, you are missing out. Thank you, Neely, so much for hanging out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, and I have to say that of all the people that I found with carnivore and keto after I got started a little more than 2 years ago, you were one of the very first. And I mean, like within the first few days, a friend who had just found out that I had gone like extremely low carb sent me some of your recipes, and I have been hooked ever since. And I'm really grateful for all of your kitchen science that you do and all of the recipes that you come up with.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot. It was about 2 years ago when I really started to be part of the keto community, because I'd been on YouTube for a long time, but really hadn't broken into the keto community. And that's like right when I was there. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. Your recipes are really great. So let's start with your story though, like how your YouTube channel got started. I know it didn't actually start as keto and things like that. So let's just talk about how that evolved. And then, just tell me your story of weight loss and healing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, strap in because it's a long one. I always say I would love to have one of those stories where everything was terrible and then I found the one perfect thing and then everything was perfect after that. But usually life is a little bit more complicated than that. So my health journey and my first diet that I went on was before my wedding when I was 19. I went on the Atkins diet. And I'm so thankful that I found the Atkins diet at that point, because I could have gone any direction because I had no like basis in nutrition or any concept of what a healthy diet was like. And I live in Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And so there's a lot of, vegans and anti-meat, and I really easily could have gone that direction. So I'm super thankful that I started with the base of Atkins. And looking back on it now, I think, my diet now is actually very similar to what it was then, even though I've gone through so many different diets since then, just trying to tweak and make things perfect and, figure out what's going to be the best long term. But it's just interesting how I could have probably just stuck with the Atkins and been real close to where I am today. So my YouTube channel actually started kind of by accident. It was actually a diet challenge. There was a group doing a diet and I wanted to be part of it. And it was not meant to be public or anything like that. It was just amongst a small group of people. And so I would never tag my videos. I would title them things that no one would ever search. And I just started kind of sharing my experience with this specific diet and kind of just evolved from there. I found that I enjoyed it. I never would have dreamt of starting a YouTube channel for the public unless I had come into it by accident like I did. So I just kind of started sharing and realized that I could just kind of share, my experiences and, different experiments in the kitchen, and people seemed to really enjoy it. And I started sharing when I got an Instant Pot. That was the first of my videos that really went, kind of viral. And I started getting a lot more followers. And so I shared lots and lots about Instant Pot stuff. And I got to the point when sharing diet related things where I was like, I can't share any more about diet stuff until I get it figured out for myself, or at least, part of the way. Because I just felt like I was jumping from thing to thing and it just wasn't working. And I was convinced that I needed to have carbs in my life because of, that's what everyone says, and saturated fat will kill you and all that stuff that we hear. And so I was trying my hardest to find a way to coexist with carbs. I was like, well, maybe if I cut out the dairy and the grains and, do more of a paleo, maybe that'll work. And through all of it, I never really found that happy spot where people talk about where they, stop, having binge cravings, on carbs and things like that. And I got to the point where I was like, I can't coexist with carbs the way that I feel like I should. And I had tried keto. Well, I had done the Atkins And then I'd gone through some different things. And then when keto, the actual term keto, became popular back in around 2010, 2011, I decided to try that. And at that point, it was the really, really high fat and pretty low protein, like people saying women don't need more than 40, 50 grams of protein per day. And I thought, so at that time I was like, well, maybe if I do that, that'll be better than, the Atkins. Like I still had the idea that the Atkins was not the right way to go, but maybe if I cut down the protein, maybe that would be the ticket. And so I did that and ended up really a hormonal mess and just my cravings out of control. Like I felt like I could eat fat without stopping and just never felt satiated. And it was just obvious things were messed up. And so I, of course, thinking, okay, so keto doesn't work. That means I need carbs. So I was like, okay, so I went back into trying to coexist with carbs again, trying to figure out a way to make it work, which is exhausting and maddening when you have those kind of, reactions to carbs where they cause you to want to overeat. It's just trying to manage that is like a full-time job. And so I did that for several years, trying to figure it out. And it wasn't until I heard Kelly Hogan on the Keto Diet podcast with Leanne Vogel. And I heard her story. And when you hear her story, like you just automatically want to be just like her. Like she was in such a hard place with her health and her weight. And she just portrays her struggle so clearly. And then like the freedom that she got from going carnivore, I was like, that's it. That's it. And I decided, I was like, I never thought I would do keto again or low carb again because of how bad I had felt. But I was like, maybe if the protein was unlimited, maybe I could do it. And I started about a 3-month carnivore diet, and I did it very clean. I did do dairy, but I didn't do any sweeteners or anything like that. And I mean, the way I felt was just incredible, like just transformation in how I felt. And like some health issues that I had been dealing with. I had a itchy patch on the back of my head that I had for probably 10 years at least, cleared up within like 2 weeks on carnivore and never came back. Even though I don't eat fully carnivore now, it never came back, which I think was incredible. It was like, it gave my body like that rest where I was able to deal with certain things that had been plaguing me for so long. So I was on that for about 3 months. I felt really good. It was before I started supplementing with electrolytes. So I had some like electrolyte issues that I didn't really realize at that point, but now looking back on it, I definitely think that was an issue and that supplementing with the electrolytes really made a big difference. But it's another, kind of a funny bump in my story where at that point is when I got an offer to write a cookbook. And so my YouTube channel up until this point was not really focused on health. It was more focused on just recipes and a lot of Instant Pot recipes. And so I got an offer from a big publisher to write an Instant Pot cookbook. And I really struggled with it because, well, first of all, they had an idea for the cookbook. It wasn't like I could make a carnivore cookbook or anything. They had, a list of things they required. And so it was either, I do it or I don't. And I was like, so I feel so good eating this way, but this is a really big opportunity. Like I don't want to let it go. And so I decided to go for it. So I took about a year making that cookbook, and they wanted it to have, rice, like brown rice. It was supposed to be healthy, beans and things like that. So I took about a year writing the cookbook. No regrets. Like I'm really happy that I did that. Like that I have that, on my resume. It's something I never thought I would do. And I did try to get as many like keto recipes in there or keto variations in there as I could, because I knew that's the direction I was going. And I labeled all of those like keto friendly or whatever. And so I took about a year. And then once I finished that, I was like, I had in my mind the whole time, I'm going to go right back to carnivore. Like that's how I felt good. I'm going to go right back. And I really struggled after that, trying to decide if carnivore was going to be, because it kind of feels like you either have to pick 100% carnivore or not. Like there's almost no in between, or at least that's how I felt at the time. I don't really think that's true, but I really struggled because my inspiration, of course, is Kelly Hogan, and she's like the 100% carnivore queen. And so I kind of had to struggle through like, do I really want to commit myself to 100% carnivore for the rest of my life? And am I choosing, bad health, versus 100% carnivore? And I had to really work through that. And through just experimentation, I came to where I'm at now, which I don't know that it's the end of my journey, but where I am now is that I don't think I need to be 100% carnivore in order to have very good health. And so because of how much of a foodie I am, and I enjoy, experimenting in the kitchen, and certain things just don't seem to give me issue, I've chosen to have a little bit more varied of a diet, ketovore or keto, depending on the day, really. And so that's kind of where I've landed with my diet. And kind of through that, after I had done that 3-month carnivore experiment, and then after the year of writing the cookbook, that's when I came back to YouTube, and came back to sharing my health journey on YouTube, because the realization of how incredible I felt eating the combination of low carb and enough protein was so transformational for me, that I knew that no matter how I tweaked my diet from here on out, that was going to be like my baseline. And so I'm always tweaking, I'm always playing with it, but like those foundations of keeping the carbs lower, and that can, vary depending on, what experiment I'm doing. And then also keeping the adequate protein, on average, those are things that I think I will keep forever. And that's when I felt comfortable coming back to YouTube and saying, okay, this is my baseline. I'm not like bouncing around to all these different things now. I have a baseline that I can share. So, and that was about 3 years ago, I think. Maybe it was just 2 years ago. Anyways, it's just been a few years that I've been sharing that. And I'm very happy with like my baseline now, as far as like where the direction of my YouTube channel, and then the foundations I have in my diet. It's like, it's like smooth sailing. Even though I keep playing with it, it's like I have those foundations and I feel good.
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago, you mentioned about binging, that is your history. And I think when people see somebody talking about binging, or they hear us, because I have the same backstory with the binging and stuff, along with eating disorders and disordered eating, and, just all kinds of stuff for like 36 years. I dealt with all of that, and carnivore fixed it for me. But when people think about binge eating and they hear us talk about that, they picture, the large person surrounded by junk food, shoveling it in. It's like this, such an unpleasant
Yes.
picture, but it's not always like that. And sometimes the people aren't even a lot overweight. For me, it was like 10, 15 pounds. But I would binge eat, and it doesn't always look like this huge gorging session. Sometimes it looks like, for your birthday, 24 gluten-free cupcakes sitting on the counter, and over the course of 36 hours, you eat 20 of them. As you walk through the kitchen, you pick one up. That is still considered a binge. And so did you do things like that? It wasn't always for you like an all at once, like at one sitting kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it definitely was that, exactly what you're talking about. And oftentimes on healthy food, especially when I was, eating paleo or, primal, I would make a pan of paleo brownies that were dairy free and made, with the cassava flour or coconut flour or whatever. And it'd be like, you take one bite and it's like, you feel like you have to eat the entire pan. I found for myself that probably the main trigger for me when it comes to like binge eating tendencies was restriction, and primarily restriction of calories, because for me, it was very much about losing weight. I was overweight through high school. That formative time in your life is just, once I started losing weight, when I was about 19 or 20, it's like you start getting attention, like it's a really big deal. And so you kind of attach to it like your self-worth. Like if I gain this weight back, or if I don't keep losing, I'm not going to be valued anymore. And so I would restrict both the types of food that I allowed myself, as well as the number of calories, feeling like if I could just, be like they say in the commercials and eat only 1,200 calories a day, if I could just do that, then I would be skinny. And so that amazingly is the thing that propelled me to overeat. And looking back at any time in my life that I would say that I had binge tendencies, it was the times where I was starving my body. So looking at it that way, I think, wow, my body was actually trying to keep me alive. It was trying to protect me. And it wasn't just like because I thought it was a deficiency in myself, like, oh, you're just weak. You're disgusting, that you can't control yourself. But really it was my body trying to protect me from, the damage that I was doing to it. Like, you're starving to death. Let's save your life. And so now looking back on it, I can think, oh, thank you, body, and have this gratitude about it and recognize that when I do actually nourish my body and give it enough of the calories and the nutrition that it needs, that I don't have that. And I know that there's different reasons for binges, and sometimes it can be more psychological. For me, I found that when I corrected that underlying restriction, that totally resolved my binge eating tendencies. I wouldn't say I was ever could ever be diagnosed as a binge eater. I mean, I don't know. It depends on how you define it, but the tendencies that I would have, it was directly related to the restriction. And I remember there was one time where I was, exercising. I was trying to burn a certain number of calories in the day, and I was trying to eat this, super low amount of calories. And I was like, oh, I'm so hungry. I'm just going to have a spoonful of peanut butter. I don't know. Peanut butter seems to be one of those foods that you just go to when you're starving. Probably because it has lots of fat and a little bit of protein and the salt. It has all the things. And I remember just taking a little bit of the peanut butter, and it was like my body took over and I could not control. And I'm just eating peanut butter like my life depended on it. And looking back at that, I think I physically couldn't even do that now. There was something physically that changed in my body that actually allowed me to be able to consume food in that quantity that I just don't have anymore when I'm nourished. So it's just so fascinating how the body has all these mechanisms, and we attach so much emotion and self-worth to all these things when it's these are primal responses. And if we actually take care of our body, our bodies, aren't as primed to have those responses. So anyways, it's a very eye-opening thing to go through and to learn about myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually got goosebumps when you were talking about maybe that was your body trying to protect you. I never looked at it like that, because I actually bought my first diet pills when I was 12. And I was on a diet probably every day since then, except when I was binging, which was probably because I was always on a diet. So that's a really interesting way to look at it. Thank you for that, because I had never thought about it like that before. And then I wanted to touch for a minute on what you said when you were kind of introducing yourself about how high fat carnivore just made you feel, kind of awful. And I just want to be clear for the viewers that even a lower fat version of carnivore or keto is still very high fat compared to the standard American diet, compared to the standard American diet, where, I don't know what the recommendations are now. Is it 20 or 30% fat? And the thing people don't realize is that our bodies need fat. Every cell in our body needs fat. Your hormones need fat. Your brain needs fat. And I do wonder, like you just said, is that part of why the binging and why the peanut butter, when you were kind of letting yourself go like that?
Yeah. And for me, when I say high fat, I'm meaning a high fat percentage, and that corresponds to a low protein percentage. So as far as the amount of fat I was eating then, I mean, it was probably similar to what I'm eating now. I was just trying to keep my calories and my protein so low that I think that's where the issue came. So I think fat is so incredibly important. And I see it as, especially when you're transitioning, when you've, damaged your body by being low fat for so long, doing super high fat can be extremely therapeutic. My issue only came in, I think, when I lowered the protein. And that was like the really big light bulb for me when I tried carnivore, was like, oh, I can feel good eating low carb and still higher fat. Like I call my diet higher fat, and then I don't know, adequate protein, like, because it's not like I'm eating a bodybuilder's amount of protein. It's like 100 to 150 grams per day, which I think that should be average and not considered high, but it's probably considered high, to the standard American diet. But yeah, fat, I think 100% is extremely important, especially in this society where fat has been so demonized and people just have gone through their whole lives, like not really even eating butter, like having margarine or, that spray stuff, that's horrible. I always laugh because people enjoy my cooking. And I think to myself, anyone can be a good cook if you use things like butter and cream and like full fat cheese and things like that. It's like these people have grown up with this idea that everything has to be low fat, and then they end up not cooking at home because all the food they make is terrible, and they end up going to restaurants where they're actually using lots of fat and all kinds of other garbage as well, and they're like they gravitate towards the restaurant food, when if they just cooked at home with like quality fat and something that actually tastes good, like you can make some really good stuff.
And people's diets are already filled. Like, I mean, people get quite a bit of fat, but not nearly as much as you would get on something like the carnivore diet. And the problem with that fat is that it's also mixed with carbs and it's in processed foods, because that is
Yes.
most of what the standard American diet is. It just is. If you are eating lots of grains, it's processed. Or if you are eating lots of breads, it's processed. If you are eating lots of prepackaged foods, it's processed. And I think the saddest part for me is I see the people at the grocery store that are clearly trying, right? Their cart is filled with chicken breasts, lots and lots of vegetables, lots of zero fat dressings, lots of sugar-free snack items. Like, these people are trying, and some of them are in one of those little carts because they're so sick they can't walk, and they're your age or they're my age. People with little kids who can barely bend over to pick up their kids because they're so sore and achy or so overweight. And it just breaks my heart because they are trying. It's just that they've been given the wrong information. And
Yes.
I wonder how we can, do you have any ideas? Like, how can we change the narrative? Because like for you, it started out like with weight loss, but you had so many other amazing benefits from going low carb, like the spot on the back of your neck, just amazing things that happen when you do that. But most people change their way of eating or go to a diet because they are trying to lose weight. And
Yes.
I just wonder if there's any way that we can change that narrative and make it more about health than weight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a huge thing, and I've experienced it, and I know so many other people have experienced it, that they did come to the change in their diet for weight loss, and then they experienced the health. And I feel like you either have to do it that way, or you have to get sick enough that your health actually motivates you. Because a lot of people, they don't know that they're sick. They have lived this way their whole life. They've watched their parents, get illness after illness, medication after medication, and they just feel like it's normal. And so they don't have that intrinsic motivation to make the changes until something really tragic happens, or until they decide that they want to look better. And honestly, I think the wanting to look better is a huge tool for getting people started. So like, I think that the health is more important, or, it's hard to weigh like what's more important or not, but like ultimately, like the health and how you feel and how you live out your life is going to be a huge benefit. But if you get there through vanity, great. So I'm not upset about, when I see people clicking on the transformation videos of, someone who is overweight and then they look like a supermodel. Like, fine. If it motivates you, great. And that's how I got there. And I'm just so thankful that I did, because, I don't have any huge health issues that were so debilitating. Like, looking back, I did have health issues for sure, but it wasn't so debilitating that motivated me to make the change. And when you're combating your lifetime of, being shown love through food and comfort through food, and like this whole system we have set up around these super highly addictive processed foods, like to be able to like really put that aside, it takes a lot of internal motivation. And like, I'll take whatever motivation I can get. And if that's vanity, that's fine with me. And I feel like so many people have that was their doorway. And then they get to the health part of it and they realize, once they've experienced it. And I think that's going to be the way it is for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize that everybody is sick. Everybody doesn't feel well, and everybody has a hard time getting out of bed or getting up when they've been sitting for a long time. And so it's easy to think, oh, it's just getting older, or this is just how life is, or, oh, look, everybody's got it. And people will say to me, don't you just want to be normal? Like, don't you want to just eat normally? Don't you want to just be normal? And I look around at normal and I think, no, it is okay with me that all I get to eat is hamburgers, steak, bacon, eggs, cheese, heavy cream, ribs, chicken wings. Like, that is totally okay with me if it means when I get out of bed in the morning, I don't have to sit there for a minute and wake up or stretch. I wake up before my alarm goes off now, which I have never done in my entire life. Like, I am well rested. I feel good. I just turned 50. I have zero aches and pains, zero, joints that hurt. I take no medications. And, 80% of Americans that are my age, more maybe, are taking medications at this point.
And like a laundry list of them.
Yes, it's just it's so sad that people don't recognize that the food is the fuel for our body and it affects every single cell. Every single cell is affected by what we eat. And so we have to protect that. And I think that's what people don't recognize. And I think that's the hardest part about changing it, is because everybody sees everybody else doing the same thing.
Right. And you don't want to feel like you're the abnormal one, like the one. And that's why I think it's so valuable for people to share their stories, like you, like me, like all of us here on YouTube. And it doesn't have to be a YouTube channel. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can share your story, even if it's just one-on-one when someone notices your weight loss or whatever. But to be able to share, I think, going back to your question about how do you change the narrative, I don't know that there's like some huge mandate that can change things. It has to be like grassroots, like person to person, or someone talking on a YouTube channel or a Facebook post or whatever. And that's really how we have to do it. And it's going to be slow. And there's going to be pushback, but like, what else are we going to do? Right.
Yeah. So if you had one piece of advice for somebody who is wanting to improve their health, wanting to improve their life, lose some weight, what would that piece of advice be from you?
Yeah, it would be increase your protein. I think there's such a prevalence of under eating protein, and a lot of that comes from just carbs being so prevalent in the diet that there's not room for protein. And I feel like if you just, instead of thinking, oh, I need to cut back my calories, I need to change this, I need to change that, like one really simple and delicious way that you can change is just double the amount of protein on your plate. And that will help you with your hunger and satiation. It will push out some things that, maybe shouldn't be on your plate. And overall, I mean, it'll just help you feel better. And oftentimes that's like just the one small step. And then from there, you start to feel a little better. And then maybe there's another small step that you can take. But I love the idea of adding instead of subtracting, and just eat more protein. Animal protein.
Yeah. And that's a great idea. And I think that that's part of why people love you. You're just so relatable, and you're so real. And that's why people take this message from you so easily, just because you're just great. So
thank you. I try, not to be fanatical on either side. Like because I've been there, like I've been on my diet journey for 20 years. Like it was 20 years ago that I started Atkins, and it's like, I've been, the evangelist for this, or, feeling like I had to do these extreme things. And it's just like, well, let's just take it one step at a time. Because a lot of times these really big extremes, they last for a week or two and then you fall off. But if you just take like a little step gradually, like over time, it adds up to a huge amount. So just doable, as long as it's doable.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think that's a great place to stop because I could sit here and talk to you for another hour. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was super fun.
And we'll see you next time here on the Carnivore Revolution.